Hey, what's up there, YouTube? On this good afternoon, my name is Von Resper Jr., better known as King Von Jr. here on YouTube now. I had to change my name and, kind of, update and, revamp a few things here and there. And, of course, I've done, as you all know, I've done videos in the past. And, of course, I haven't recorded anything in a while. But, but yeah, plus you could also, like I said, follow me on Twitter at King Von Jr. 720. All lowercase letters with with the number 720 right at the very end. Yeah, so of course I'm also on Instagram as well at plain King Von Jr. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not hard to find at all. but yeah, of course as many of you may know, I'm a major fan of sports history, and the main sports that I like to cover and main sports I like to watch and keep up with are basketball, football, boxing, and dare I say even wrestling. I'm a wrestling fan. And of course, I'm a video game fan as well. Big, huge gamer. But yeah, when it comes to history, especially with sports, I study on a consistent basis in my downtime. I respect and admire the history of I respect and admire the history of sports that I enjoy. You know what I'm saying? I pick up whatever book. I'm saying, look at whatever articles I may find even on the internet, and and just read them. I'm saying, there have been certain players that I've watched and have studied that really caught my attention. Certain players that stick out more than others. Certain players and athletes that really stick out more than others. That are able to transcend their sport, transcend their craft in their own way. In many different ways, in ways that others from their time have not been able to do. Which, of course, as we all call those certain once-in-a-lifetime athletes. You know what I'm saying? Those guys who are able to, exceed and go beyond the limits of their time and just dominate like no other. So anyway, of course, in boxing, you have guys like Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, so on and so forth. Of course, the names. In football, of course, you have the Jerry Rices, your Joe Montanas, your Walter Paytons, your Jim Browns, people like that, guys, who are the golden standard, of their field. In basketball, of course, you have your Michael Jordans, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Wilt Chamberlain, Larry Bird, guys like that. These are the athletes. In other words, my point is these guys are timeless. There's certain guys, certain athletes, even certain musicians, whatever, that are just timeless. Like they transcended and transcended and made such a major impact in their time, that they could be talked about for years and years and years and not be considered outdated. You know what I'm saying? So like no matter what anybody else says, these are certain athletes that are just timeless and are just beyond beyond their era. And so that's why I hold them in the highest regard. So of course, these are the type of players whose legacies I'll continue to defend all throughout the test of time. So of course, as many of you know, follow me on Twitter. I also write blogs as well. So what I may write or what I may say, even on Twitter and stuff, Facebook, whatever I may say, may come across as being nostalgic, but it's just to spotlight what made the game so great, piece by piece, brick by brick, and to show how greatness is, in and of itself, was properly built. So athletes, like your Wilts, your Alis, your Jim Browns, from that 60s whatever time period, had enough influence, dominance, and impact to where they transcended their eras and can't be limited to their time period. So, for example, a guy like Wilt Chamberlain, Wilt Chamberlain was way ahead of his time, way ahead of his time. He was like one of the ultimate trendsetters in NBA history. 7'1", between 260, 275 at his peak, whatever size. Ran a 4.4 in a 40-yard dash, and had over a 40-inch vertical, and could bench press between 500 to 600 pounds in his prime. This and Wilt was able to do stuff like this without the advantages, of today's athletes, of the modern day athletes. Like they didn't have the same type of they didn't have the same type of equipment, with the weights and like the vitamins and supplements and all this other all this other stuff, all this nutrition that these guys have now. And Wilt was able to do Wilt was able to to do the things they did for a guy his size, even in that time. So you can only imagine what he would be able to do even now, given the same type of balance, the same type of advantages that that these guys even have now. You know what I'm saying? So plus Wilt was in tremendous peak physical shape. He was one of a kind. In football, same thing. Same thing with with someone like Jim Brown. Jim Brown, was pretty much, Jim Brown was clearly a man among boys. Even in his time, and for him to be able to, put up the numbers that he did, back in the late 50s, mid 60s, whatever. And that's astonishing. So if you take someone like him and you give him the same, the same weights, same supplements, same equipment and all this other stuff that you give that you give the modern running backs, the modern athletes, especially against today's rules and today's defenses, what have you, and stuff like that. I believe he'll do even more damage, considering what he did even then. So that's just to respond to this whole today's era is bigger, stronger, faster, and all this other stuff. But yet if you're going to take guys from back then and put them in today, you have to make it a fair and balanced. But in their case, because they dominated so well, it's really not it's not going to be as fair for today's guys. Because if guys like Wilt and Jim Brown, whatever, if guys like Wilt and Jim Brown were able to, to dominate even then, they'll be even more dangerous now. So, so yeah, those are just examples. So in other words, of course, as I said, they can clearly dominate any time period if you give them the same stuff as these other guys. However, there's one thing that I'm blatantly against, as you very well know, and I'm not alone in this. I'm blatantly against, I'm blatantly against, how those athletes are diminished and not rightfully acknowledged by your modern day fans, media members, especially with the modern day younger generation fans and whatnot. Time, the thing is. I don't like to come across as being a hater. I'm just someone who is objective, and so I'm not here to offend anybody or whatever. I'm just a guy who just, as you can tell, does his homework. I'm very observant, and so yes, I'm just the type of guy that just likes to put things in proper perspective. Of course, as you very well know, I'm a very passionate fan who likes to use facts to to properly balance my observation. It's nothing hard to figure out about that. So, but one thing I don't like is these unfair comparisons where players today are matched up with other I just don't like these unfair comparisons. Where players are matched up, with others who's, with others whose legacies pale in comparison. So, like for instance, in the NBA, especially like with ESPN, they like to pull out these random facts out of the sky. Whereas if a player has has X amount of games with a triple double, so on and so forth, they like to compare them to Magic Johnson, Oscar Robertson, whatever, what I'm saying? And it's just ridiculous. You're comparing guys, whose games, not just their careers, but just to me their games in of themselves, and are not. Of course, are not even. You're comparing guys of today, whose legacies don't even compare, not even the same zip code as guys like a Magic Johnson. I've seen ESPN, just do this, time and time Again, they constantly do this, just to further market and and promote today's players. In spite of the league being much more watered down to me than it's ever been before, and it's a league-wide issue. Um, so like I said, for example, with that, I mean, just look, just looking at career, especially one thing for me, I can't stand ring counting, or nothing like that, especially when it's not even put in the right perspective. For example, someone like Kobe Bryant, as you well know, is a bona fide NBA legend and a Hall of Famer. And I mean, like I said, of course his body of work speaks for himself. He was greatly influenced by the likes of Michael Jordan, which is of course something to truly admire. This is not Kobe MJ bash fest that I'm doing, by the way. Just for the record, I'm just using it as an example. However, that's where it starts, and for me, that's really where it should end, because when you look at production, it's definitely a different story. Like I said, playing style wise, same size, what have you, that's one thing, but when it comes to the pure details, it's another. So when you look at facts, their production is very different. I've seen the comparisons. The production is very different. Michael's career averages in scoring, rebounds, assists, whatever, are all superior. It's a higher field goal percentage. Of course, everything, everything you name it, he's superior. Does that come across as being a hater? No. Just because, of course, Michael won 10 scoring titles, Kobe won 2. Michael has 5 MVPs, Kobe has 1. Does that, let me ask you a question. Does that come across as being a hater? Just because I'm saying that, I'm saying that outside of rings, one guy doesn't compare to the other, just because their numbers and their production, are inferior. No, does that, like for instance, does it sound like I'm being a hater when I say that a guy who has 2 Finals MVPs on 5 championship teams should not be compared to a guy who won 6 Finals MVPs on all 6 championship teams? No, that's not being a hater. That's perspective. If I say that said player has 2 scoring titles while player A has 10 scoring titles, does that mean I'm a hater? No. If I'm saying that the same guy who has 1 MVP cannot be compared to a guy who has 5 MVPs, does that mean that I'm being a hater? No. All it is putting things in perspective. That's all. If I say that one player who shot 45% for a longer career shouldn't be compared to a guy who shot 50% throughout his career, who was a guy who was more efficient, more accurate, had a better shot selection, was able to get to the basket better, what have you. Does that mean, does that sound like a hater when I say that player, can't be compared to him? No. All I'm doing, I'm just kind of taking the names out right now. Does that mean that I'm being a hater? No, I'm just putting things in perspective. So therefore, with everything taking into consideration Kobe's achievements and body of work, at least put him along the lines of your Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, and Julius Erving. I mean, that's a very high honor in and of itself. That's a very strong company, a very strong class. So of course, let's just say it. Kobe is Kobe. If it weren't for the constant comparisons, I'm just shooting straight from the hip. I'm just going to keep it 100. If it weren't for so many of those constant comparisons, with MJ constantly being shoved down my throat for years, I can sit back and truly enjoy Kobe's career the way that I really want to. You know what I'm saying? So if it weren't for stuff like that, if it weren't for the media constantly throwing it in your face, all you have to do is get one more to tie MJ and all this stuff. Just leave the man's career alone. Just look at it for what it is. Look at him as an all-time great in and of himself, without comparing him to MJ. Plain and simple. I mean, how hard is that? How hard is that to do? For me, it's not hard. You know? Does it sound like a hater? No. You know, I mean, everything that I said is, just clear, just clearly, I mean, it's just clearly putting things in perspective. Body of work, statistics, what have you, awards, achievements, all that stuff. It's a big difference, bigger difference outside of championships. It's called perspective. But I mean, that's one thing. But the bigger problem that I have is, is when people want to diminish legends from the past and the era that they dominated. I have a problem, especially it's more prevalent than for me in the NBA than any other sport that I've ever witnessed. Especially when it comes to this whole commentary of today's players are bigger, stronger, faster, all this other stuff. If that was the case, if they were bigger, stronger, faster, how come this league has no big men? How come the biggest complaint among fans and even ex-players is that it's like, where are the big men? That's the running question. If today's league was so much bigger, stronger, faster, where are the big men? If the NBA was if the NBA was bigger, stronger, faster, and all the and stuff like this, why is it that the rules were changed in favor of perimeter players, of smaller players? Why is it that this sport has become a small ball sport? If it's so much bigger, stronger, faster, if anything, the only ones that have gotten bigger are the guards. If anything, the NBA has actually gotten shorter and and even heavier, especially with the hormones and stuff that they put that they're putting out for these athletes. Sorry about that, but yeah. I mean, that's a contradiction in and of itself. It was, like I said, if it was bigger, stronger, faster, you'll have larger players all across the board, including at the center position, the power forward position, the inside players. The big men have been extinct. They become extinct as a result of the rules changes. Of course, the NBA. Like when the NBA changed the rules around 2004, 2005, they specifically said to open up the floor, which means to open up the floor for your guards to get to the basket faster and score much faster, and give them a better chance to score. Open up the floor means to give the guards,